You remember CatDog, right? That cartoon from our childhood with the cat and dog who were, well, literally stuck together? Pretty fun and lighthearted stuff. Or was it? You'd be surprised just how much more unnerving that show was than you might remember. Get ready to take a deep dive into those supposedly innocent episodes and uncover the disturbing elements you never noticed as a kid. Let's begin with the episode Teeth for Two. This specific episode is particularly notorious for its generous use of body horror and what you might call gross out humor. You've got cat and dog, these two brothers, linked in the weirdest way possible. What one eats, the other one feels the effects, and not in a good way. I mean, can you imagine finding a screw or even an old man in your mouth? Or what about being electrocuted because someone else decided to chew on a radio? All thanks to Dog's questionable diet. It's crazy and honestly a bit gross to think that what Dog ate directly affected Cat's teeth. And it wasn't just weird stuff showing up in Cat's mouth. His teeth changed shape too. They became all pointy and sharp right after Dog chomped down on some snacks. Now, I'm no dentist, but that's not normal, is it? And then they showed all the disgusting things going on with his teeth without any filter at all. Then there's that part where Cat, determined to clean up Dog's teeth, actually crawled inside his brother through his own mouth to give him a brush. Like that is a whole new level of invasive and gross and disturbing. Look at it. You're welcome. But it wasn't just the gross out humor and body horror that made the episode so intense. It was the sheer torment Cat went through. All because of Dog's reckless eating habits. The poor guy was in constant pain, wailing and pleading with Dog to stop eating garbage. And the icing on this messed up cake was the threat of that expensive and potentially painful dental surgery. And it hung over Cat like a dark cloud, promising even more misery if Dog didn't clean up his act. Then there's this crazy part where Cat gets shocked because Dog was munching on a radio. It just made me feel so bad for Cat. I mean, the guy gets put through some serious pain in this episode. And their relationship? You'd think they'd have each other's back since they're brothers. But no. Instead of taking care of each other's teeth, they just eat stuff that they know will mess each other up. Like, who does that, dude? Then, to make things even worse, they're constantly lying and fighting. There's zero sympathy for the pain they're causing one another. And the worst part, they don't even learn their lesson and end the torture themselves. They get all the way to the point where they both need to go through with this procedure to have their teeth replaced. And to top it all off, they also broke out with a disgusting rash and will have to go through yet another horribly painful and expensive procedure to get rid of the rash. But I guess at least Dog said he'll promise to be careful about what he eats, or at least for Cat's sake, I hope so, because they're seemingly stuck with these horrible, horrible tooth problems. So yeah, Teeth for Two was far from your usual goofy cartoon episode. It was pretty dark and could definitely give you the creeps, and that's why it really sticks out in the series. But that wasn't the only episode giving us nightmares back in the day. Remember the series finale of CatDog? That episode, Meet Dog's Friends, was something else. I mean, we're talking about a kid's cartoon show here, right? But boy, did it get under the skin. What really knocked me for a loop was how they just drove straight into the unsettling reality where our food comes from. Dog finds out his favorite grub, things like burgers and hot dogs, are actually made from animals, and these animals are supposed to be his pals. I mean, imagine his shock when he finds this out. And that image is definitely going to stick with us for a long, long time. You know, this isn't like any other fluffy kids show. This episode is pretty intense. It really lays bare a part of life that's usually swept under the rug, especially in shows meant for kids. But they were brave enough to tackle the grim truth about how animals are slaughtered, which just makes the episode super chilling, especially since pretty much the entire cast is also animals. And oh, don't even get me started on the guilt. Dog feels so guilty after finding out he's been munching on his buddies. That part where he has a nightmare visited by the ghosts of his favorite snacks, telling him their life stories, it was so intense. It's one thing to know where your burger comes from, but it is a whole other thing to feel like you've personally ended these animals' lives. And that kind of guilt is tough to shake off, and the show didn't pull any punches showing that. Dog's response to all this was also so over the top. I mean, guilt can make you do crazy things, right? He just stopped eating because he was scared he'd be munching on a buddy. He even started talking to a rock he thought was talking back to him. It was such a raw look at how guilt can mess with your head, and it made you really feel what Dog was going through. And things just got way weirder when Dog actually thought about eating Cat. Like, what? That's his brother. And not just his brother. Like, this is his brother that he is attached to, my guy. It's as if they just said, who cares about boundaries? It's really messed up and goes to some dark, dark places. And it definitely shows how freaked out Dog was. But man, that is just so creepy. Then Johnny Meatseed shows up and you think things are finally looking up. But wait a second, this guy's growing meat on trees. That's not normal. We all know meat doesn't come from trees. So this oddball solution, instead of making things clearer for Dog, just made everything even more confusing. It didn't help, it just added to the mess. So looking back at Meat Dog's friends, you can't really say it was a typical cartoon finale. It made you think, it got under your skin. It's a ride you won't forget, touching on guilt, what's right and wrong, and the whole debate about eating meat. It's just such a weird way to end the show, right? Now there's another really wild episode of CatDog, The End. And believe me when I say, it was just as much of a trip. You see, in this episode, CatDog peered through Winslow's telescope and thought they saw the apocalypse. They try to warn everyone in Nearburg, but of course, no one's buying it at first. But things start to go south real quick. A whole mess of chaos breaks loose, and everyone eventually ends up at CatDog's place. They're all scrambling to turn the house into an ark. Yeah, an ark. And what makes this episode extra unnerving, though, isn't just the threat of the apocalypse. Nah, it's the way that fear gets under everyone's skin. Think about it. The whole end of the world scare really made everyone lose their cool.
I'm afraid. I'm more afraid. I wet my pants.
People were acting crazy left and right. The whole town is thrown into panic mode, with everyone's worst fears taking center stage. And what's more, the fear led to some unexpected and honestly pretty unsettling revelations. Lube spills his real name.
Ignatius!
Then there's the whole love triangle that blows up between Shriek and Cat. The whole situation was like some intense reality TV show, except this was happening in the middle of the perceived end of the world in a kid's show. Oh, and let's not forget the absolute chaos that goes down at CatDog's house once Winslow shows up. And they finally all find out it was just a peanut shell that they saw in the telescope. I mean, you've got to admit, that's a bit unsettling, right? It just goes to show how easily things can spiral out of control from a simple misunderstanding. And it's wild to see how wrong assumptions can create such a ripple effect of panic and chaos. So CatDog's house is destroyed, and we're talking full-on destruction here. Then the fights start to break out. Everyone's letting out their anger and frustration in the most physical way possible, and it's like seeing the worst side of everyone. All because of this looming threat that turned out to be a peanut shell. So all in all, the end is a ride and a half, sure. It's still a CatDog episode with all the comedic bits, but man, does it dive deep. It explores what fear can do to people, how it can lead to some uncomfortable truths being spilled, and how it can cause total chaos. The whole episode's a roller coaster of tension and panic, enough to make anyone a bit uncomfortable. So yeah, this one's definitely up there on the list of disturbing CatDog episodes. And trust me, that's saying something considering what we've already talked about and what we're about to get into. So the list goes on. After that apocalypse scare, you'd think things would calm down for our CatDog duo, right? Well, you thought wrong. This time, we're talking about the episode where CatDog and Winslow got a little too wrapped up in a horror movie about a monster named Toothpick Head. One of my favorite episodes in the entire series. Now imagine this. You just watched a scary movie late at night. The wind's howling outside and every little noise in your house is suddenly making you jump. That's exactly what happened to CatDog and Winslow. They got so spooked after the movie, they just started believing Toothpick Head might just show up in their home. And then the entire episode is just this roller coaster of fear and tension. They keep finding hints and clues that make them think that Toothpick Head is actually in their home. And it's like that feeling when you're home alone and you hear a noise upstairs. You know it's probably nothing, but a part of you can't help but imagine the worst. And let's not forget about the classic horror vibes this episode was giving off. It was like they took a page straight out of a Stephen King book. There's a scary monster, a stormy night, and some seriously scared characters. You've got to admit, it's pretty unsettling for a kid's show. Then there's the whole prank situation. Turns out, it was Winslow messing with CatDog the whole time, pretending to be Toothpick Head, and has been absolutely terrorizing CatDog the entire night. And that's just cold. Not only do you have the fear of a monster, but you also have the betrayal in the mix. But what really takes the cake is the ending. Just when you think it was all just a prank, the real Toothpick Head shows up. And that's like a twist straight out of a horror movie, leaving you questioning what's real and what's not. And it's enough to send chills down anyone's spine. So even though this episode had some funny moments, the fear and tension were real. Between the horror movie vibe, the prank, and the surprise ending, this episode was definitely a lot more intense than what you'd usually expect from a typical CatDog episode. And speaking of horror, how can I forget that one Halloween special? Yeah, if you've been to the channel, you know I'm a Halloween fan, and I'm talking about the one where CatDog's night of trick-or-treating turned into a horror movie. The episode, CatDogula. You know how Halloween episodes usually have a bit of a spooky twist? This one took it to a whole new level when Dog gets bitten by a Peruvian vampire tick. And next thing you know, Dog's turning into a vampire, trying to bite Cat and everyone else. It was like the whole town of Nuremberg was hit with a vampire epidemic. Even the normally mischievous Winslow wasn't safe.
Some kid in a really good wolf's costume bit me. Wolf? Hey, I feel kind of funny.
Now, I don't know about you, but the whole vibe of this episode was super unsettling. Everything was darker, scarier. The usually goofy town of Nierburg was looking more like a scene from Bram Stoker's Dracula. And it wasn't just the creepy background music or those terrifying red eyes and fangs. It was the complete change from what we were used to with this show. And let's not forget about the body horror. Seeing Dog, Cat, and all our familiar characters turning into these blood-sucking monsters was hard to watch. One minute, Dog's his silly old self, and next, he's fighting this uncontrollable urge to bite everyone he sees. Poor Cat was living in constant fear, and who could blame him? Then there's this whole thing with the town's social dynamics going out the window. Everyone was either running from the vampires or turning into one. All the familiar faces, like Lola and the greaser dogs, they were all part of this vampire outbreak. And let's not forget about those ruthless vampire ticks. They were just plain nasty. Making fun of Cat's attempts to save his brother, the ticks didn't show a shred of empathy, which made them all the more horrifying. And it's one thing when you've got villains who have a soft spot somewhere, but these ticks were pure evil, and that's pretty unnerving. So yeah, CatDogula was definitely not your usual Halloween special with all its horror elements, dark atmosphere, and complex storyline. It's no wonder the episode sticks out in our minds as being a little bit more on the disturbing side. And this was CatDog like we'd never seen them before. It was a wild and creepy ride. And there was another seriously messed up episode called Deep End. Yeah, the one where they end up getting punished for something as small as breaking a rule at the local pool. That episode wasn't just weird, it was straight up disturbing. To start off, we had our usual villain, Rancid Rabbit, but this time he was more than just an annoying troublemaker. He took on this authoritative role as the lifeguard, and man, did he misuse that power. And it's not just a case of him being like a little strict, he turned a fun summer hangout into a downright prison, harshly punishing CatDog for small mistakes. Then there's the whole dystopian vibe going on. A swimming pool turned into a maximum security prison? That's not just strange, it's chilling. Think about it. A place meant for fun and relaxation is suddenly this terrifying place of punishment. And speaking of punishment, the things CatDog had to go through were way beyond normal. They're getting physically abused, getting locked up in the sauna, also known as the hot box, and it's like they've landed in some twisted nightmare. And that's not all. This ordeal takes a toll on CatDog, both mentally and emotionally. They start showing signs of distress, they're desperate, they even start hallucinating. And watching them go through such a mental ordeal, it's upsetting, to say the least. It's one thing to deal with a challenging situation. It's another to watch the psychological impact that it has. And one of the most disturbing things in this episode, though, is how CatDog seems to have no rights at all. They can't fight back. They can't appeal. It's just punishment after punishment after punishment. And the feeling of injustice, it's super strong in this one, and it doesn't sit well, that's for sure. For the kids watching such an episode, it definitely makes them question a lot of things. And the topic of injustice isn't something that really hit all that frequently in older cartoons. Now, this might not apply to everyone, but this episode also has certain scenes that could scare specific viewers. If you're someone who's scared of small spaces, water, or even the thought of being alone, this episode might have made you more than a little uncomfortable. And Rancid Rabbit doesn't just stop there at being an overbearing authority figure. Oh no, of course not. He seems to enjoy CatDog's misery. And that is also seriously messed up. Watching someone derive pleasure from others' suffering, it's something that I'm sure hits a little too close to home for some viewers. And lastly, the guy's a manipulator, and a good one at that. He lies to the other characters, makes false promises, manages to keep their loyalty, and it's a chilling reflection of the tactics used by oppressive regimes, making the whole episode feel even more disturbing. So while we remember CatDog as a fun, lighthearted show, episodes like Deep End show us there was a lot more going on in the writing room. From dystopian vibes to psychological distress and downright sadism, there were quite a few things that made this episode particularly unsettling. And it's quite a shift from the playful banter we're used to in CatDog, wouldn't you say? So I hope I hit on some hidden gems of disturbing CatDog episodes so you could relive your childhood or maybe go back and check out this incredible show for the first time. And if you want to see more disturbing cartoon moments from the past, check out this next video because you have no idea how messed up some of these shows got. Later.